Allah, Father of the universe, Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Allah is my protector, my guide, and my salvation. By night and by day, through His holy prophet, Noble Jawali. Ashe, Islam. Give thanks, Mark. As usual, we'll start with our readings for every meeting. Yeah. I hereby inform all members that they must end all radical, agitating speeches while at work, in their homes, or on the streets. We are for peace and not destruction. Stop flashing your cards at Europeans. It causes confusion. Remember, your card is for your salvation. Failure to obey these orders will be of severe consequence. We are for love, truth, peace, freedom, and when these principles are violated, justice must then take its course. Any member or group of members who hold malicious feelings toward the temple or the prophet, or violate the divine covenant of the Moorish movement, will receive their reward from Allah for their unjust deeds. All true Moors will and must obey the law as laid down to them by their prophet. If they lose confidence in their prophet, they should turn in their cardon button, cease wearing their turban and fez, and return to the state where I, the prophet, found you. This is a holy and divine movement founded by the prophet Noble Jawali. And if the prophet is not right, the temple is not right. The prophet, therefore, is sending out a divine plea to all Moorish Americans that they do their part in protecting their prophet and the temple. This is an everlasting movement founded by the prophet through the will of Allah to redeem his people from their sinful ways. Noble Jawali. To be proclaimed at every meeting. Islam. I am glad to know that I have a few faithful Moors among you all, and I desire for them to know the truth and the divine truth. There is a host of jealousy about me and the movement now by the same people on our side of the nation that claim I was only a joke and unreal. But now, since they have found out from the government officials and the nations of the earth that this is the only sole foundation that all Asiatics must depend upon for their earthly salvation as American citizens, they are working every scheme that they can to disqualify me so they may take charge of the situation. I have notified all these things to you long ago in the past. It is through the faithful Moors that attribute to the movement and uplifting funds. The ones that paid their divine respect to me and the movement will be remembered. That is why I am calling upon all faithful Moors to increase their faithfulness to me, your prophet, and your divine Moorish movement. I need finance and I need it badly. Never before have I needed finance so badly as I do at present, so I can shove aside the discord that is facing the nation. It all comes through jealousy because of my fame and nobility. The nations of the world will not recognize the movement without I, the prophet, being head. It has been proven by my works which I have performed in the past few years. Prophet Noble Jawali. To the members of the Moorish Science Temple of America, Islam. This is the instruction from your Prophet Noble Jawali. Be faithful unto your forefathers' divine and national creed, that you will be blessed for your good deeds that you sow in the flesh. Allah is the one that judges the world, and his judgment is now on. But the weak can comprehend it not. The end of time is drawing near, so says Allah to his divine prophet, I am Noble Jawali. And that is why many hearts have been turned to stone. Many have eyes to see but cannot see, ears to hear but cannot hear, lest they would be confounded of their sins. These are trying hours now, dear Moors, and every evil spirit is moving, and they are trying every weak mind to overthrow and drag out the true foundation that has been laid, and to cause confusion in the minds of the ones that do believe. But if you have the true love of Allah and the spirit of your forefathers, you fear not what you hear or see, but will sacrifice the utmost of your very life to protect your movement and your prophet. Watch your enemies, dear Moors. Your enemies are the ones that speak against your prophet and ridicule him to the very lowest, and the ones that speak against your divine and national principles of your temples. Act accordingly, and Allah would bless you for your good work. Peace, your divine prophet, Noble Jawali. Islam. The divine constitution and bylaws. Act 1. The Grand Sheikh and the chairman of the Moorish Science Temple of America are empowered to make law and enforce laws with the assistance of the Prophet and the Grand Body of the More Science Temple of America. The Assistant Grand Sheikh is to assist the Grand Sheikh in all affairs if he lives according to love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, and it is known before the members of the More Science Temple of America. Act 2. All meetings are to be opened and closed promptly according to the Circle 7 and love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Friday is our holy day of rest because on Friday the first man was formed in flesh, and on a Friday the first man departed out of flesh and ascended unto his Father God Allah. For that cause, Friday is the holy day for all Muslims all over the world. Act 3. Love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice must be proclaimed and practiced by all members of the More Science Temple of America. No member is to put in danger or accuse falsely his brother or sister on any occasion at all that may harm his brother or sister, because Allah is love. Act 4. All members must preserve these holy and divine laws, and all members must obey the laws of the government, because by being Moorish American, you are part and parcel of the government and must live life accordingly. Act 5. No organization of the More Science Temple of America is to cause any confusion or overthrow the laws and constitution of the said government, but obey hereby. Act 6. With us, all members must proclaim their nationality, and we are teaching our people their nationality and their divine creed, that they may know that they are part and parcel of this said government, and know that they are not Negroes, colored folks, black people, or Ethiopians, because these names were given to slaves by slaveholders in 1779 and lasted until 1865 during the time of slavery. But this is a new era of time now, and all men now must proclaim their free national name to be recognized by the government in which they live and the nations of the earth. This is the reason why Allah, the great God of the universe, ordained Noble Jew Ali the Prophet to redeem his people from their sinful ways. The Moorish Americans are the descendants of the ancient Moabites, whom inhabited the northwestern and southwestern shores of Africa. Act 7. All members must promptly attend their meetings and become part and parcel of all uplifting acts of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Moorish Americans must pay their dues and keep in line with all necessities of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Then you are entitled to the name of faithful. Husband, you must support your wife and children. Wife, you must obey your husband and take care of your children and look after the duties of your household. Sons and daughters must obey father and mother and be industrious and become part of the uplifting of fallen humanity. All Moorish Americans must keep their hearts and minds pure with love and their bodies clean with water. This divine covenant is from your holy prophet, Noble Jew Ali, through the guidance of his Father God Allah. Islam. Today we're gonna go over some wisdom of Confucius. We had Noble Jew Ali tell the Moors about honoring all divine prophets, and one of the prophets that we're told to give honors to is Confucius. So this is Wisdom of Confucius, and this is the foreword. Confucius, born in 5050 BC, remains a major influence on Chinese thought and culture. The principles and concepts that he taught his followers are an integral part of the Chinese character of today. Confucianism has as one of its major tenets a version of the golden rule that states, what you do not want done to yourself, do not do to others. This belief transferred to Western culture as do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Confucius was concerned with man's actions on earth, not with what would happen to a man after death, or with the metaphysical question of whether he would be punished or rewarded for his actions on earth. None of his teachings deals with the concept of an afterlife, only with how one should live. While you do not know life, what can you know about death? It was by following this golden rule that Confucius believed one could live a good life. Conceived that man was basically good, Confucius felt people were led by example. A model ruler would be assured of a model populace. The emperor was appointed by heaven to serve as a father and mother to the country, and it was his responsibility to lead his people by example. Confucius believed that not more surely does the grass bend before the wind than the masses yield to the will of those above them. Besides the ruler-subject relationship, Confucius outlined 4 others: husband-wife, father-son, older brother, younger brother, and friend-friend. These relationships are based on the reciprocity expressed in the aforementioned golden rule. What you do not want done to yourself, do not do to others. In all these relationships, there is a person who is dominant and one who is submissive, yet both are striving for virtue, and the dominant member is a benevolent manner in showing the way of the submissive member. Confucius also outlined 5 primary virtues: love, justice, reverence, wisdom, and sincerity. These virtues are the guideposts for man's actions. Many of Confucius' sayings, what the superior man seeks in himself, what the small man seeks is in others, or the cautious seldom err, reflect these virtues. The wisdom of Confucius is a compilation of the sayings of Confucius and his disciple Mencius, who devoted his life to spreading the teachings of Confucius. Even though Confucius lived well over 2,000 years ago, his sayings are still fresh, thoughtful, and meaningful for modern readers. So when we look at the teachings of Noble Drew Ali, the point that was stressed with Noble Drew Ali is, one, for us to have a holy covenant with each other, so that brother, sister, father, mother, whatever, look out for each other. Do not look at some other race, nation, whatever, before you look at your own. Because when you deal with those people, they don't look out for you before they look out for themselves. So when we look at, for example, using the Chinese culture, Chinese people have their Chinese community and they serve their people. You don't see Chinese people go into Italian stuff to go eat. They go to Chinese people to go eat. You don't see Chinese people, they might wear European clothes or whatever like that, but their name is relative to them. They don't, mix and mingle, if you will. They stick to their protocol, right? When we look at the Jewish community, they have their own blood bank, where you're gonna have to put that on mute. Hey, you're gonna have to turn down your volume on that. The Jewish community have their own blood bank, so only they give each other blood. They don't take blood from outside people in their community. In certain Jewish communities, they have their own police. They're not calling 911 if there's an issue. They have their own people that they're calling, right? That goes into the whole thing about, having a certain level of honor and respect for your own stuff. Now, what the issue that we've had is that when we start doing that, they like to play race card with us, right? And most of the time it's because the ones who are doing that, they don't have a culture. They don't have a nationality. They don't have customs. They don't have certain things that puts them on the standard to be able to do those things and act in that certain way. They would always pull the race card. As soon as a bunch of brothers get together, they can't do that because they're going to do something negative or whatever, right? Or what's all those black people doing together like that? So, people are always looking, something's going on, right? Once you have your culture and you're in tune with your culture, then you're able to exercise certain things and not have issues. And part of our issue is that we've been outside of being a nation for so long that now that we're starting to be a nation, it's, people are hesitant to deal with it or to give us consideration or whatever, because it's not normal for dark-skinned people to wear feathers. It's not normal for them to dress in traditional clothes. It's not normal for them to not like certain music that's derogatory, right? It's not normal for us to see our brother and say what's up or say Islam or greet each other in some loving manner. Every time they see us or experience us, it's always in some type of hateful, vengeful, why arguing or whatever, right? So when Noble Drew Ali was expressing to the Moors that, you know, we have to learn to love instead of hate, it was more so internal, right? We have to have that mindset amongst each other before we have that with other people. And it starts with us loving each other, then you can love other people. Once you start loving other people before yourself, then you're constantly going to be in a state of self-hatred. And you're never gonna evolve into, you know, what people expect us to be, which is, you know, return of the ancient ones or the gods of the planet or whatever. We're always going to be looked at as the lowest form of humanity, society, or whatever. So Noble Drew Ali brought his lessons, and then he gave us reference points as to where we can go to learn certain things in order to bring ourselves to that position of being recognized, being appreciated, being honored, being respected, so that we're not looked at as the quote-unquote bottom feeders of society. We're looked at as human beings just like everybody else is looked at, and getting the same respect that we get from, or getting the same respect that other people get. So we're going to go to book 12, or chapter 12, and this is about philanthropy and friendships. Yen Yuen was asking about man's proper regard for his fellow man. The master said to him, self-control and a habit of falling back upon propriety virtually affected. Let these conditions be fulfilled for one day, and everyone around will betake himself to the duty. It is to begin in oneself, or think you indeed, it is to begin in others. I wanted you to be good enough, said Yen Wen, to give me a brief synopsis of it. Then the master said, without propriety, use not your eyes. Without it, use not your ears, nor your tongue, nor a limb of your body. I may be lacking in diligence, said Yen Wen, but with your favor, I will endeavor to carry out this advice. Chung Kung asked about man's proper regard for his fellows. To him, the master replied, when you go forth from your door, be as if you are meeting some guest of importance. When you are making use of the common people, be as if you are taking part in the great religious function. Do not set before others what you do not desire yourself. Let there be no resentful feelings against you when you are away in the country, and none when you're at home. So, when you go forth from your door, be as if you were meeting some guest of importance. So Noble Drew Ali made a statement to the Moors, for example, of Moors always look your best, right? That goes in line with this. Moors speak in an intelligent tone. That goes in line with this idea of once you're leaving your domicile, carry yourself in a manner as if you're going to meet whoever you consider to be a prominent individual in society. Even if you're just going to the corner store, right? So this is why, again, there's examples of Moors, let's say, a good example, Moor going to the corner store. And he said, you know what, I'm just going to the corner store and I'll put my fez on. Goes to the corner store, put his fez on, and the corner store is run by Arabs. And the Arabs recognize that he's obviously not the average black guy. So they start questioning him on, well, why do you have a fez on, and, certain things. And in the end of it, the brother ended up not paying for anything at the store because he left with the mindset that I'm leaving here, I'm going wherever I'm going, but I'm going to deal with myself as if I'm going to whatever, which means always have your national headdress on, have a turban on, sisters covering their heads, wearing respectable clothing, so that the appearance is not going to be, oh, he or she is just like any other black guy out there. So whatever they say, do, or whatever, doesn't matter, right? In the teachings with Noble Drew Ali, he told, it was said that Amor got pulled into a store. And when he went to the store, there was a bunch of Arabs there. And the Arab went to him and showed the Moor a picture of the Prophet. He said, you know who this man is? And the brother said, yeah, that's my Prophet Noble Drew Ali. All the Arabs in the store at that point pulled out temple cards to show that they were down with the program. Even if they say that they honor Muhammad or they say that they're Muslim or whatever, they knew about Noble Drew Ali. They knew about the teachings to the point where they had a picture of Noble Drew Ali in their store. These are just some random Arabs that had a store, right? Any questions or comments? I may lack diligence, said Chung Kung, but with your favor I will endeavor to carry out this advice. Zhu Ma asked the like question. The answer he received was this: the words of the man who has a proper regard for his fellows are uttered with difficulty. His words uttered with difficulty, he echoed in surprise. Is that what is meant by proper regard for one's fellow creatures? Where there is difficulty in doing, the master replied, will there not be some difficulty in utterance? The same disciple put a question about the superior man. Superior men, he replied, are free from trouble and apprehension. Free from trouble and apprehension, said he. Does that make them superior men? The master added, where there is found upon introspection to be no chronic disease, how shall there be any trouble? How shall there be any apprehension? The same disciple, being in trouble, remarked, I am alone in having no brother, while all else have theirs, younger or elder. Zihai said to him, I have heard this. Death and life have destined times. Wealth and honors rest with heaven. Let the superior man keep watch over himself without ceasing, showing deference to others, with propriety of manners, and all within the four seas will be his brethren. How should he be distressed for lack of brothers? So again, going back to the covenant that we're supposed to have with each other, that regardless of where we go in the world, you're not supposed to look at your brother, your sister as separate from yourself. Even the ones who don't have the knowledge that we have. We know that those people are Moors. They might not know that. They might not accept that they are part of our nation. But that doesn't mean that we look at them on some type of lower level because they don't call themselves Moors. They say that they're black, or they say they're Christian, or they say that they're in some other, school of thought. The challenge comes in with our people not wanting to accept why it is that we take the position that we take. Majority of them have this thing of, as soon as they hear Moors, they're bringing up, they saw something with a guy in a fez doing something, or they bring up some type of religion, or they bring up something that has absolutely nothing to do with Moors, but only due to their ignorance of what this is about. So in other nations who have aspects of our teachings in theirs, like we say, Noble Ali told us to honor all divine prophets and to give acknowledgement to all the prophets. So once we have these teachings of all these other prophets, then now we can have these communications with all these other people. Again, going back to the point of where there is found upon introspection to be no chronic disease, how shall there be any trouble? How shall there be any apprehension? Why would there be, if we have knowledge of, one of the examples that we use, for example, is having a knowledge of history, and that, Europeans went throughout the world and they changed history all throughout the world, right? When we say, somebody from Sri Lanka, and we tell them, oh, no, not Sri Lanka, you mean Ceylon, which is the original name of Sri Lanka. They would allow you and them to be more approachable, because you're taking them into a place where they might not even gone for a number of years. They might even forgot that was the original name of their country. And you bringing it up to them reminds them of their granddad or whoever that would have taught them that knowledge, or that would have exposed them to that part of their history. There's a book that I'm reading right now called Los Indios, and it's written by a brother who's Mexican, Aboriginal and Indigenous, and he was, all through his life, he was in this mindset of he's not indigenous, right? The same way that with our people, that they don't think that they are, the indigenous people. They think they're Negro, black, color, whatever. He thought he was European. He used to get green contacts and blue contacts and dye his hair, and similar to certain people, right? And then his grandfather used to always try to put it on him that, you're actually indigenous. Why you being a sellout and all that stuff to your race, and why you selling out your ancestors or whatever. Like that. I'm not trying to hear what you're saying or whatever. So one day him and his grandfather had a little situation. He pushed his grandfather. His grandfather fell out to go to the hospital or whatever. While he's at the hospital with his grandfather, accepted the fact that his grandson put him in the hospital, because without his grandson putting him in the hospital, his grandson wouldn't have felt the guilt, and he wouldn't have sat there and listened to the lessons that his grandfather had been trying to tell him for however many years that he's been trying to tell him, to give him this lesson, that you're actually indigenous, right? So, Granddad forgave him for that, and he goes on to tell the story about, getting a letter from his granddad that was written in the language of the olden times or whatever like that. Then he had to go on a pilgrimage to his homeland to go learn this language again in order to read the letter. And then when he read the letter, he got the story about, the Aboriginal culture, how Europeans came here, stole all the stuff, whatever, right? So when we abandon our culture and the opportunity comes for us to get it back, there's many different facets, there's many different ciphers that we could be involved in to get this thing back. Again, going back to why Nabi Juali told us to honor all true and divine prophets, because there's fake prophets out there. So he made it specific to make sure you honor the true and divine ones. And those ones are, there's ones that he listed, and then there's ones that weren't listed that we know, every culture has somebody that came to them that looked like them to tell them about, where they went wrong, what they can do to correct themselves, and how they're supposed to take this information, pass it on to the younger generation so that the history doesn't repeat itself of us being in that state of not knowing ourselves. Because every prophet taught this aspect of know thyself. Every prophet taught the essence of truth. And once the people accepted it and embraced it, then things started changing for them. And we haven't. This is why things aren't changing for us. We're in this cycle, this negative cycle, because we've done the wrong things for so long, and then when the right thing came up, we didn't embrace it. So now we're trapped between, like what Juali says, truth and falsehood strangely mixed. There's truth, and that's what it is. Then there's falsehood, and then that's what it is. But once those things are mixed now you're in confusion, which is the state of our people, the state of the indigenous people, which is our people, the state of Africa, which is our people, and then everybody else, you can see them prospering or having a certain, better way of life than we have. And it's strictly because they decided to follow the ancient principles. Listen to their prophets. Go back and, like the brother was saying in the Los Indios, go back to his ancestors, have conversations to them about where is it that you're coming from with this? Like, why is it that, I'm a sellout because I don't want to be indigenous. The indigenous are savages and all this, right? When all that was a fiction. That was falsehood that he embraced as truth, to the point where there was a part in the book where he's talking about, we're the foreigners here. We're not really the Aboriginal people, and he's making reference that he went to school and the European taught this and that about the Mexican history or whatever like that. And Granddad's like, well, if you're not indigenous, then who's these Europeans? You saying that they're indigenous? Because there has to be some indigenous people in this land. There can't not be indigenous people. There have to be indigenous people. Who are those people? And he also makes reference in the book a lot to him hating his dark skin when he was growing up. I don't like my dark skin. Wanted to do bleaching cream and all that to get away from the truth about who he really was. Right? Another part is, death and life have destined times. Wealth and honors rest in heaven. Let the superior man keep watch over himself without ceasing, showing deference to others, with propriety of manners, and all within the four seas will be his brethren. How should he be distressed for lack of brothers? Zi Chang asked what sort of man might be termed enlightened. The master replied, the man with whom drenching slander and cutting calumny gain no currency may well be called enlightened. He with whom such things make no way may well be called enlightened in the extreme. Zi Kong put a question relative to government. In reply to master, mentioned three essentials: sufficient food, sufficient armament, and people's confidence. But, said the disciple, if you cannot really have all three, and one is to be given up, which would you give up first? The armament, he replied. And if you are obliged to give up one of the remaining two, which would it be? The food, he said. Death has been the portion of all men from old. Without the people's trust, nothing could stand. So again, going back to Noble Drew Ali and the principles, that the 5 highest principles known to man: love, truth, peace, freedom, justice. You go to anybody in any nation and you bring those 5 principles to them, and nobody would have an issue. Nobody's going to be defiant, nobody's going to argue, nobody's going to debate that they want those things. The second principle, truth. So we have to maintain that position of being, of having honesty. We have to maintain the position of being sincere in our approach, because we are the enlightened ones having this information. We are the enlightened ones because we wear turbans and feathers. That's what those things mean, that you're enlightened. So if we're enlightened beings, the fact that we have this level of enlightenment just based on appearance, before they even talk to a Moor, people who are of high knowledge, they know, oh, that guy or that sister has a certain level of knowledge. And that means that they're going to have certain expectations of us. And we have an obligation to live up to those expectations, because Noble Drew Ali even told us, follow me and you're going to make it through. When the fire comes, I'm going to be your water. When we look at Noble Drew Ali, even though he wore a suit, he threw a robe over it. Even though he was going up against lots of different odds, he maintained a certain level of diplomacy in his dealings with other people. You're not gonna, unless it's people out to give him a bad name, you're not gonna find people talking reckless about Noble Drew Ali, that he was doing this and he was doing that, and oh my gosh, I can't believe Noble Drew Ali did that or said that or whatever. Everything that he dealt with was on a certain plane. And again, having him as an example to follow, like we were talking about earlier. We had a meeting earlier. We were talking about the importance of women in the Moorish movement, and we brought up the Noble Drew Ali picture of him holding the sister, right, and her being unconscious, and him holding her. Now he's conscious and he's holding her, but she has humanity written on her. So when we look at the model of the Moorish movement of uplifting fallen humanity, it's really about uplifting women. Because once woman's uplifted, then humanity is going to be uplifted, because all humanity comes through her. Humanity doesn't come from the masculine side of the gender. Humanity comes from the feminine side of the gender. So once the woman recognizes about her nationality and her birthrights and who she is as a divine being, then she would bring forth divine beings automatically. But it starts with her recognizing that. And there's also the saying that man knows not by being told. So we can say this, like the black guys talk about, the black woman is God and all that type of stuff, and and they've been saying that, and ain't nothing changing. Because you can't just say that and think that it's gonna make women wake up to who she really is. There has to be something to show. This is why Noble Drew Ali put it in the literature: lessons for the children, lessons for the wife, lessons for the husband, lessons for the family, lessons about sincerity, lessons about, in that same book right there, right? Lessons in order for us to get ourselves in line with righteousness again. And again, once we're in lines of righteousness, and we're saying like true righteousness, not righteousness because wear something, or because you gave an offering on a shrine or whatever. Righteousness from within, that the individual realizes that something's wrong. Just again, what we're always saying, that when man unfolds, is God unfolds. So there's not God before man. God only exists because of man. There's no, oh, that thing out there do it, and then I'm going to be whatever. No, you're going to be the one that's going to live that godly life, that's going to manifest God to you. That's the only way that it's going to work. As soon as you go external first, you're going to have, thought forms out there that's going to try to attach to you. You're going to have people who do their little whatever, put energies out in the ethers, have stuff attached to you, because you're going to be open. You're going to be unprotected, because the real world is within. The real expression or manifestation of what God is really within. Again, going back to the wisdom of Confucius, that death and life have destined times. Wealth and honors rest in heaven. So any honors and wealth that people are looking at out here are illusion, because everybody, the metaphysicians, the high priests, the master scientists know that heaven is a mindset, not some place out there. So once you have the mindset, then wealth and honors rest with you. But that's a mindset first. They have the saying that Rockefeller went around broke, and he just pretended he was rich, and people just gave him finance. There was no handing down of any finance from family or whatever like that. He faked it till he made it, and he faked it so good that people thought that he was really echelon. They were like, "Yo, we'll fund anything that you want to do," just because he was faking it that good, or just because he had the mindset that, "Oh yeah, I am wealthy." This is what that book Think and Grow Rich is about. That once you have it here, then you can have the things that everybody out there have. And then now you have people saying, well, I just created a free whatever like that. Come on down and join up to my free seminar about how you can be a multi-million-dollar or whatever. Just give me $1. Well, if 1 million people give him $1, he has 1 million right now. Right? Those are con games, because man is supposed to be evolving past those little things that means wealth and honor. It's not about finance that makes wealth and honor. Right? Wealth comes from knowledge that you have. Right? Wealth comes from knowledge. Knowledge is the greatest money that you can have. Because once you have knowledge, things are going to come with that. If you don't have knowledge, then you're probably not going to be on the earth plane too long. Because even the scriptures tell you that the people died for a lack of that. They don't die because of evil stuff or devils or whatever. They die because they don't have knowledge. And as soon as you start acquiring knowledge, you start realizing what the important things are and what the useless things are. And then once you realize what the important things are, you take those useless or childish things and then you give those things to children. Let children deal with those things. And you deal with the things that the gods deal with. And all this is part of what Noble Drawley presented to us by bringing us back into what they call the constitutional fold of government, so that we can start governing ourselves instead of being governed by others, which is what puts us in that mindset of thinking external things and things that have no substance are really what it's about. Right? Any questions, comments? Qi Shing once said, "Give me the inborn qualities of a gentleman, and I want no more. How are such to come from book learning?" Su Kong exclaimed, "Sir, I regret to hear such words from you. A gentleman, but a team of 4 can never overtake the tongue. Literary accomplishments are much the same as inborn qualities, and inborn qualities as literary accomplishments. A tiger's or leopard's skin without the hair might be a dog's or sheep's when so made bare." Duke Hai was consulting Yu Zhou. He said, "It is a year of death, and there is an insufficiency for ways and means. What am I to do?" "Why not apply the tithing statute?" said the minister. "But 2 things would not be enough for my purposes," said the Duke. "What would be a good of applying to the statute?" The minister replied, "So long as the people have enough left for themselves, who of them will allow their prince to be without enough? But when the people have not enough, who will allow their prince all that he wants?" Right. Going back again to Noble Drew Ali and him telling the Moors that it takes finance to uplift the nation, that a beggar nation can't attain the highest spirituality. A nation that has removed itself from supporting its own is not going to reach the highest attainment, because there has to be some type of commitment on the people of the nation to support what it is that's going on, right? Like we say, we started having our own sandwiches, but it doesn't make sense people go down to the European down there to go buy their stuff. It doesn't make sense to go to Subway and go to whoever else when we could just do it here and people could support their own. Doesn't make sense to go out there and go get Bibles and Qurans and whatever other literature out there when we have literature here that'll give you more stuff than that stuff's going to give you. You have no idea who made that stuff down there. You know how much times that guy digged his nose, didn't wash his hands or whatever like that. At least here, you know, Moors made that, and they're going to deal with their people properly. You know this. Because again, you're dealing with people who are along with your principles. They got the same prophet as you. They do the same, they're on the same wavelength that you're on. But as soon as you, again, going back to what Joali said, as soon as you put the energy to the stranger before your own, you're already putting yourself in negative. Because we're supposed to be dealing with our own on the same level as we deal with people who we don't know. And our pattern is deal with the people who we don't know better than we deal with the people who we know. And then when we ask anybody else, if we go to the Hindus. Hindus are going to do Hindu stuff. The Sikhs are going to do Sikh stuff. They might play around like they want to be, head of some party or whatever like that, and, be in the government and whatever like that. But they're in there to look out for their own. They're not in there to look out for everybody else but their own. And it's evident in when you see them amongst each other. When you see them amongst each other, just them. The Chinese amongst you want, you know, we want our representation to look out for us. So the guy who's running for whatever party, he's gonna go talk to all his Hindu, whoever people that got finance, and all of them are gonna say, here's a check. We'll support your campaign. Here's a check. Other people are gonna see that and then get down with that and say, here's a check, if they're not the same nationality or religion or whatever else. Because numbers are telling. If we had all the people that had issues, for example, with taxes. Everybody who has issues with taxes realize that, hold on a second, the people who are taxing you are foreigners here. How is it that it moved away from foreigners paying the indigenous taxes to indigenous people paying the foreigners' taxes? When there's documented things in history showing that Europeans paying the indigenous people taxes. How did the crossover happen? If the people realize who they were, taxes stop tomorrow. People realize who they were. All these pulled over for whatever $500 ticket and all that stuff ends tomorrow. Because all they have to do is realize that, oh yeah, those guys are foreigners. How they get authority to do certain things? Where did they get the authority?
So there's a law for that.
As far as yeah, well, we'll say historically, Europeans were the ones who always had to pay taxes. Historically, right? Because they didn't have anything of their own. So they had to buy their way out of everything. So you have, if you do your research on the Barbary Wars, right? When Moors were kidnapping Europeans. And Europeans would have to pay a tax in order to just go sit down with a Moor. Talk about something. Just to sit down, you need to pay a tax. After we sit down, now we're going to talk about paying again for us to talk. And then you're going to pay again for whatever else. Now, when taxation without representation is criminal, which is how some of the crossover happened. Because they didn't really have to charge a tax to talk to you. Because they know that they were kidnapping people wrongfully. Right? Like they know that they didn't have to take that guy's ship and put Europeans in slavery and all that stuff. They didn't have to do that. Because we were the rulers of the planet. Like what you need European for to do something? Unless you're a lazy ass. And you don't want to do it to yourself, which is where people get when they get into this high, whatever. You know what I mean? You see it going on right now. Guy who has finance and then he has made butler or whatever doing some stuff that he should just be doing. What do you mean? To your house. Like, what do you mean pay somebody to sweep, clean, cook and all that stuff? Right? Take out your trash that you made.
Yeah.
Right? Certain things, because everything is based on universal laws. So if the universal law is cause and effect, then everything that you do is going to have an effect. Doesn't matter what it is. That's why in the Quran it says, don't even step on an ant or whatever. If you step on an ant, you shake the throne of Allah. And you know what I mean? People walking, they don't even care. They're not even looking at, oh wow, that's a snail or a worm or a whatever. They're just walking. And then you have those, new age whoever, whatever like that. They're gonna go at every tree they see, they're gonna hug. And they see an ant, they're watching their step. And if they see a spider, they put it on a paper and put it outside and all that. Because there's something there with regard to that. There's a higher level of understanding that a lot of people don't have. And it's not that they don't have it because they don't want to have it. They don't have it because they weren't taught certain things. They weren't given certain keys, which again goes back to why it is that there's a prophet. Right? He came to put us on a certain mindset so that we can change the conditions. Because once the mindset changes, then out there's going to change automatically. Once the indigenous people realize that they're not Negro, black, colored, they're indigenous. They're not African and Canadian and Trinidad or whatever like that. They're indigenous. Then things are going to change. But then once they don't change that mindset, like Drew Ali said, the worst is yet to come. And when we look outside right now, we're seeing some of that worst manifesting right now. Which in the 20s, he was talking about the worst is yet to come. But some of that worst is here now that we got to do. Any other comments, questions? Yeah, more.
That's pretty funny.
No, I know, because you know what? I was pointing at you to read the 7 hermetic laws that you posted.
Yeah.
That's where I was going. But yeah, and then you could. You can put all that knowledge out. You have a question?
No.
Oh, okay.
You were saying that the worst was yet to come, but the worst has already been here, right?
Yeah. No, yeah, that's what I was saying. That the worst that was yet to come when Drew Ali was around is here now. And that's not even all the worst. There's still more worse to come. It's not even over yet. It didn't even start yet.
I was wondering, maybe remember we were talking about just sort of going over, I was thinking that we can sort of thinking of this in terms of how this process sort of manifests in terms of coming back into our nationality, and then how that really manifests in real time in terms of activity. Other activity that we're going to, how our activity looks from a sort of organizational point of view, in terms of sort of, like we were talking about the taxes and these kind of things, and understanding that.
Those are low level.
Well, from the perspective of them being low level, but expecting that now that we're on this level on our square, that you're going to go out there.
And they're just going to bow to you or whatever.
And bow to you.
Yeah.
And also from the perspective that that's not really.
Yeah, the all of
it.
Yeah.
That's really the end result.
Yeah.
Of it. Once we get our stuff together. Right.
Yeah.
And maybe, like for example, cards. Remember,
Yeah.
Where that.
Yeah.
What we see, what we feel the position is, and how we see that activity coming forth that, we may be facing things, and before this we might have gotten one of these Europeans to sort of try and help us out, right? Let's say, but that really is more of a, like you're saying, position.
Yeah.
Right? We're not going to find ourselves, let's say, I don't know,
Hiring.
drinking and driving, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Because there's really, like I think you're saying, a change of energy.
Mhm.
I don't know if there was if we had
Phone is there? With regard to
what our position is here.
yeah, with regard to the idea of declaring your nationality and quote unquote
Old business people
being a Moor or whatever, there has to be a mindset shift before any type of papers, cards, plates, or whatever people throw out there as being what it means to be a Moor, right? Drew Ali told us that this is divine and then it's national. So if it's divine and national, divine was listed first because that's an integral part of the nationality part. Where are you divinely with regard to this information? We know that prior to this information, we weren't anywhere close to divine. We were so far from divine that, we didn't know that that was our downfall. That was why we were getting a lot of the mistreatments and abuses and certain things that we were getting. Because we were taught that, divinity comes from, you go to this place and the guy at the podium and, you go on your knees and clasp your hands and then you'll be divine and you say some words or whatever to be divine, right? And divinity, again, comes from the individual looking within. So when there's a saying also in the Quran that man finds himself where he can solve his problems best. So if there's an issue, if there's something going on in life that appears to be a challenge, whether it's a health thing, a societal thing, a mental thing, whatever, there's probably an answer within that you should be looking to first. If guy puts if you get back to your car and then there's a yellow thing on there that says you pay $500 tomorrow or we're taking your property, it's probably because you shouldn't have parked there, not because those people like to put yellow things on people's cars. And then it goes back to where were you that even made you say I'm going to park there. It's like when people go to the mall or whatever, and then they're wasting gas trying to get a door spot, they could park down there and just walk. Because when you get in the mall, you're going to be doing more walking than if you just parked over there and just walked to the mall. Right? Then they end up losing themselves because now they got in there now, and now they don't know where to park. Now they're pushing the thing, trying to find the car and all that type of stuff. Don't know where they parked or whatever. Right? So when you get into this information, know that it's mental first. It's divine first. It's not about, you got some papers or you got some cards, so now you're a Moor because now you got the card and the paper. It's way bigger than that. And it has to be, it's not put out that it's bigger than that by people. Most people, it's just put out as, just buy this and then you can be a Moor tomorrow and everything's going to be fine and they're going to recognize and all that. In the world of colonization, these colonists are not giving up their shit. These colonists aren't just giving it up just because we know that we're Moors. there better be some divine things that we're doing. And some of those things, again, brother, you found the thing, Ted?
Yeah.
Some of those things are outlined in what Brother Tesba is going to read, which is part of the divine instructions that we have to get before we start going into the realm of the physical things and getting them. You had something, Omar? Or you want to?
I was just going to say, in terms of just to expound on the whole aspect of this this platform being something that excludes us or exempts us from the so-called laws that have been put upon us. We were the law. We are the law. So really, we need to be adhering to all of those things. Really, what's happened is the script has been flipped, and those that were so-called scoff laws are the ones that were breaking the law now have become the law. And we now are existing in a so-called lawless state, commentatively, and that we are manifesting, doing all the things that they were doing. But now that we've sort of come into an awareness of who we are, I think some of our expectation is, because we've now seen that we're supposed to be on the throne, that anything that we've done wrong now should be sort of just put to the side.
Exempted, yeah.
Exempted.
Yeah.
And that's not what this is about.
Yeah.
Really, we have to do twice as much work because we were the ones that created this problem to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what the prophet said. All of your old stuff remains in your old business.
Yep.
And that was sort of from a spiritual level to say, okay, you know, I might have been doing this stuff at this point. That belongs there. Maybe there's some responsibility for that, but everything moving forward now has to be done in a certain light.
Right.
This isn't really about now saying, okay, now I can
go back and
or
apply
go forward and break laws and somehow be exempt from them,
right, yeah.
because of that.
Yeah.
So anyways,
It's not. But it does.
So this is taken from the Canaanland, chapter 2, the 7 Hermetic principles. These principles of truth are 7. He who knows these understandingly possesses the magic key, before whose touch all the doors of the temple fly open. The Canaanland. So the 7 Hermetic principles upon which the entire Hermetic philosophy is based are as follows. 1. The principle of mentalism. 2. The principle of correspondence. The principle of vibration. The principle of polarity. The principle of rhythm. The principle of cause and effect. And the principle of gender. These 7 principles will be discussed and explained as we proceed with these lessons. A short explanation of each, however, may be given at this point. The principle of mentalism. The all is mind, the universe is mental, the Kabbalah. This principle embodies the truth that all is mind. It explains that the all, which is the substantial reality underlying all the outward manifestations and occurrences which we know under the terms of the material universe, the phenomena of life, matter, energy, and in short, all that is apparent to our material senses is spirit, which in itself is unknowable and undefinable, but which may be considered and thought of as universal, infinite, living mind. It also explains that all the phenomenal world or universe is simply mental creation of the all, subject to the laws of created things, that the universe as a whole and in its parts or units has its existence in the mind of the all, in which mind we live and move and have our being. And it goes on. So,
sorry, may I have these 7 principles again, please? Just a list.
So 1 is mentalism, 2 is correspondence, 3 is vibration, 4 is polarity, 5 is rhythm, 6 is cause and effect, and 7 is gender.
So if we say nationality card, all is mental. Nationality card is a mindset before it's the card. Nationality card is the example of the being who has it. The nationality card, the paperwork is a manifestation of what's in the mind of who created the paperwork or whose paperwork it is. Cause and effect. Noble Joali said, don't flash your card at Europeans because it causes confusion. The card is for your salvation. So know that by presenting that, there's going to be something that comes back to you. It depends on who you present it to. Just showing the paperwork. You know, we have the thing of, you know, living within contracts and reserving your rights on contracts. So before you sign anything, you write all rights reserved on it. Writing all rights reserved on something before you sign and submitting that thing, they might come back to you and ask you, what is that? What do you mean by that? Why are you putting that? That's not what you put on your last signature. How come you're using that? To be able to articulate why is part of the all is mental, right? Vibration. Everything is moving. Everything has some type of frequency to it. So, you know, there was Moors, for example, who, until they were of sound mind, they didn't even go get a fez. Because a fez sets a tone for how you're going to be looked at or how you're going to be dealt with Islam. Right? The whole idea of having a fez or wearing a turban is showing that you're vibrating on a certain frequency. The fact that you have that, the fact that you have a nationality card and you don't have some other instrument lets you know where you're vibrating, right? Rhythm, right? Similar to vibration. Everything has some type of movement to it, right? Polarity, correspondence. You know that there's always two poles. There's always an extreme, right? Expect the extreme so that you can be prepared. Expect that when you say, here's a nationality card, the extreme might happen when you present that. But that extreme could go both ways. The extreme could be positive extreme or negative extreme. You might have already experienced this with telling our people that we're Moors. And then they go extreme on you. Positive or negative. Just because you're saying, I'm not black. What do you mean you're not black? And they start going nuts. Right? Extreme. Right? Gender. Right? Male and female is not gender. Masculine and feminine is gender. So gender in water, hot, cold. Gender in atmosphere, hot, cold. Gender does not just mean masculine, a male being and a female being. Right? Gender is opposites. Right? Which again is a law, a deeper law of gender. Right? Law of opposites is a deeper aspect of gender. Because you can have, you know, like we were saying with the positive and negative. One of those is masculine, one of those is feminine. and it's in everything. And once we could master these on some type of level, you can count all this as, a segment of what Juali said, divine before national. If you take all these, right, you have 7, and then you have 7 on the Quran. Then you have 7 seas, and then you have 7 chakras, and then you have 7 continents, and then you have 7 everything else. And then you can line up all these with one of those other things that's 7. Each one of these lines up with the 7 days, which all the days are Elohim, which lines up with one of these. And again, all this is part of when Noble Juali told more study, then study yourself. This is inclusive of the studying, not just law dictionaries only, not just spiritual books only, not just Holy Quran and 101 questionnaire and that's it. There's billions of books out there, and no man knows everything. So it's important for us to take the steps to try to know a little bit more than we knew yesterday. They say that because of time, or because of having time, rich people read, I think it's book a day or 2 books a day or something crazy, because they got time, right? It ended up being I remember that 52 was in there. I don't know if it was a week, a month, or whatever, but 52 was in there, right? So if they can put that time to doing that, no wonder everybody else can't get their stuff together. Because again, knowledge is really what this is about. This is really about us acquiring knowledge so we can go to that next level in our mindset. Once we go to that next level, then you go get knowledge there, then to go to the next level. But once we stay on this base level where we think that this is only about the physical things, then nothing's gonna manifest. We're always gonna have something that we gotta do. The master answers, give a foremost place to honesty and faithfulness, and tread the path of righteousness, and you will raise the standard of virtue. As to discerning what is illusory, here is an example of an illusion. Whom you love, you wish to live. Who you hate, you wish to die. To have wished the same person to live and also be dead, there's an illusion for you. Duke King consulted Confucius about government. His answer was, let a prince be a prince, and ministers be ministers. Let fathers be fathers, and sons be sons. Again, going back to Noble Juali saying that there's enough work for everybody to do. And from Allah, every man is given their portion. So with what you've gotten is for you to do what needs to be done for the nation as a whole. Because everybody has their place. Everybody has their slot that they can go in. Majority of circles try to fit in square pegs, which is why nothing ever happens. Because they don't want to play their position. They might think that being this big machine, being a nut around the screw is not what I want to do. Well, that's what you do. It's just what it is. Screw, that's what you do. Screwdriver, that's what you do. Screwdriver as a hammer, you're probably not going to get too much stuff done. Right? Good, exclaimed the Duke. Truly, if a prince fails to be a prince, and ministers to be ministers, And if fathers be not fathers, and sons not sons, then even though I may have my allowance of grain, should I ever be able to relish it? The man to decide a cause with half a word, exclaimed the master, is Sulu. Sulu never let a night pass between promise and performance. In hearing causes, I am like other men, said the master. The great point is to prevent litigation. Having raised some question about government, the master said to him, in the settlement of its principles, be unwary. In its administration, see to that loyally. The man of wide research, said he, who also restrains himself by the rules of propriety, is not likely to transgress. Again, the noble-minded man makes the most of others' good qualities, not the worst of their bad ones. Men of small minds do the reverse of this. Qi Kang was consulting him about the direction of public affairs. Confucius answered him, a director should be himself correct. If you, sir, as a leader, show correctness, who will dare not be correct? Qi Kang, being much troubled on account of robbers abroad, consulted Confucius on the matter. He received this reply, if you, sir, were not covetous, neither would they steal, even were you to bribe them to do so. Qi Kang, when consulting Confucius about the government, said, suppose I were to put to death the disorderly for the better encouragement of the orderly. What say you to that? Sir, replied Confucius, in the administration of government, why resort to capital punishment? Covet what is good, and the people will be good. The virtue of the noble-minded man is as the wind, and that of inferior men as grass. The grass must bend when the wind blows upon it. Si Chang asked how otherwise he would describe the learned official who might be termed influential. What I wonder, do you mean by one who is influential? Said the master. I mean, replied the disciple, one who is sure to have a reputation throughout the country as well as at home. That said, the master, is reputation, not influence. The influential man, then, if he be one who is genuinely straightforward and loves what is just and right, a discriminator of men's words and an observer of their looks, and in honor careful to prefer others to himself, will certainly have influence, both throughout the country and home. The man of mere reputation, on the other hand, who speciously affects philanthropy, though in his way of procedure he acts contrary to it, while yet quite evidently engrossed with the virtue, will certainly have a reputation both in country and at home. Fan Chi, strolling with him over the ground below the palace of the rain dance, said to him, I venture to ask how to raise the standard of virtue, how to reform dissolute habits, and how to discern what is illusory. A good question indeed, he exclaimed. Well is not putting duty first and success second, a way of raising the standard of virtue, and is not attacking the evil in oneself and not the evil which is in others, a way of reforming dissolute habits. And as the illusions is not one morning fit of anger, causing a man to forget himself, and even evolving in the consequence those who are near and dear to him, is that not an illusion? The same disciple asked what was meant by a right regard to one's fellow's creature. He replied, it is love to man. Asked by him again, what was meant by wisdom? He replied, it is knowledge of man. Fan Chi did not grasp this meaning. The master went on to say, lift up the straight, set aside the crooked, so you can make the crooked straight. Fan Chi left him, and meeting with Si Hai said, I had an interview just now with the master, and I asked him what wisdom was. In his answer, he said, lift up the straight, set aside the crooked, and so can you make the crooked straight. What was his meaning? Words rich in meaning, those, said the other. When Shun was emperor and was selecting his men from among the multitude, he lifted up Ku high, and men devoid of right feelings toward their kind went far away. And when Sang was emperor and chose out his men from the crowd, he lifted up Ayin with the same result. Su Kang was consulting him about a friend. Speak to him frankly and respectfully, said the master, and gently lead him on. If you do not succeed, then stop. Do not submit yourself to indignity. The learned Sang observed, in the society of books, the superior man collects his friends. In the society of his friends, he is furthering goodwill among men. So that was some excerpts of Wisdom of Confucius. We're looking at it right now. We also want to open up the floor for questions before we do our Quran reading. So if there's any questions or comments or anything else, feel free to put those out right now. Any questions? New people? You know y'all got some. Omar. Oh, he's out.
Yeah, about the seven, when you relate seven to the EOB, and to the days of the week, you also say that there's 7 days in a week, 7 days in a month, 7 days in a year, and 7 days in creation. So that number is powerful. You also say 7 Elohim. And the Elohim are the most high. So seven in essence is the number of laws in the universe. So if you are in line with all 7 laws, you will get the right result. It's not that Moors are rejecting people when we say you have to look inside yourself and you have to take responsibility. It's that there is no such thing as getting a wrong result if you're in line with those 7. It never happened because true laws have their own repercussions, right? You cannot break a law, right? So that's the ultimate meaning of a law. A law is something that can't be broken, right? Not something that can be bent, not something that needs somebody to come and arrest somebody else. You just can't break a law. That's why there's only 7 in the whole universe, in all of creation, in all of time, in all of space. There's only 7 laws. And every other law is a child in one of those 7 laws. And then people, we create statutes. We create laws, but in reality they're statutes. Because they require us to give the repercussions. Right? If the repercussion has to be done separately, somebody has to think about it and apply it, that's not a law.
Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
My question is just about the word more itself, and looking at it in the Black's Law Dictionary, it says that more is an officer of the Isle of Man. What is the Isle of Man, and what does it mean by he summons the several sheetings? I have no idea what it's saying is.
You got you can probably look up sheetings in the on the bridge there. So
And is an officer another word for a trustee? An officer in the Isle of Man.
So when the Moors were ruling, that's why it talks about the 100 bailiffs. The Moors were the ones that were in every position. So when it's talking about the Isle of Man, it's talking about Europe. It's talking about wherever there was Moors ruling. They were the ones who would be the quote unquote collectors. Same thing that we're talking about with the taxes.
Okay. Because there's also an island called the Isle of Man.
Right.
Are they referring to this specific land mass?
To that jurisdiction, yeah.
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 So a Moor started there and
Well,
just spread out to different land masses?
But it was more, you could look at it more like rulership,
Right.
right? So when you have a certain amount of power, right, you can either abuse it or you could control it. Certain Moors took the position of abusing their power, which is why you had Europeans go to the Sultan to say, you know what, we don't want anything to do with the king and whoever of Europe who were at that time were Moors that were putting them in slavery. So we want to have our own separate jurisdiction with your blessing, Sultan, or whatever like that, so that we can come across the Atlantic and have our own jurisdiction where we can live peacefully without having to pay these shillings to quote unquote the rulership. And then there were ones like the Sultan who had power and knew how to control it and use their power, because when you look at the history of the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, there were many Moors who were against the Sultan giving these Europeans this jurisdiction of land to go do whatever, because they, in their mind, they thought they were doing the right thing by enslaving somebody else. So when they look at people who are against the Moorish perspective, they would always go to that definition and then say a Moor is an officer. So that means he's under somebody. Well, the king was a Moor, and the judge was a Moor, and the court was ruled by Moors. So even if the Moor was an officer during that time, it's not like he was under some European, like when you see officer today. And or people hear officer today and they're thinking, oh, they work for the court or they work for some European power. There was no European powers ruling during those times. All those people who were classified as Europeans during those times, they were enslaved to us. They didn't have power like that. So it's just stressing the point of the fact that the power of the Moors is like 100 bailiffs. If anybody sees a bailiff today, bring 100 of those people, and that represents one Moor in those times. Which is why people have this issue with Moors today, because they know the type of power that the Moors wielded during the time of our rule. But they also know that, there were Moors who built universities and taught people. There wasn't just Moors kidnapping people and that's all that Moors did. There were Moors who were also teaching the planet at that time. There were people who were going across the planet to go to the Moors just to learn. Right? So there's it goes back to that thing with Juali about the truth and falsehood strangely mixed. That there's so much information about Moorish history that when you do your research in it, you're gonna have to decipher, what are we gonna embrace as something to hold, and what are we gonna say, you know what? Even though it was Moors that did that, that was some BS. Let's leave that over there and move forward in a different direction, which is again what Noble Juali did with telling the Moors to learn to love instead of hate. Get the hatred out the way. There's no need to hate any other race. There's no need to hate any other people. Once we deal with love, then we're pretty much doing unto others what we want them to do to us. Maumoka.
And I think also it's important when we're looking at definitions, did you say it was from the Black's Law Dictionary?
Yeah.
Also to look at, sometimes they'll give a timeline for when that definition came into the language. So a lot of the times because the language evolves all the time, right? Sometimes you'll see it's from the, where it's coming from, what languages it's coming from, and what time period it's coming from as well. So you can look at that definition, and you might find definitions that are a lot older than that are more encompassing. Because it seems to sort of, you said it was one definition, right? So there were others, and that just had to do with their function on the Isle of Man, I think. Yeah, I've never looked at it, I don't know. Yeah. What's this thing about the sheeting or whatever? It's not, it says something about several sheetings. I don't think that means, okay, so that's something from that.
Yeah, so sheeting. A writing or tiding or division in the Isle of Man, where the whole island is divided onto 6 shuttings, and in each of which there is a coroner or chief constable appointed by a delivery of a rod at the Twinewall Court or annual convention. King, Isle of Man, 7.
I'm trying to collect them of taxes.
Well, that's the tiding part, right? It also says a writing or division, right? In the Isle of Man, where the whole island is divided onto 6 shuttings, and each of which there's a coroner or chief constable appointed by a delivery of a rod on the Twinewall Court or annual convention. That's the end of the sentence. Second, the constable of the king, and then third, Isle of Man, onto itself, the number 7.
How do you spell sheeting?
Yeah, SHEADING. So just hearing that, going back to more, Black's Law, an officer in the Isle of Man who summons the court for several shuttings. The office is similar to English bailiff of honor.
So, subject, this is a law dictionary definition, right? So that means that that's a specific jurisdiction. That's a specific position in that jurisdiction. Because it's law, it's specific. So that means there is no existence of you outside of that under the law. Because that's your law.
What purpose does the bailiff have?
Similar to what?
I'll look up bailiff.
What that's it. They call it the court of order.
Sounds like a judge.
Not the bailiff isn't a judge, but he's not. It's like when you see a bailiff in that court, Ontario court, for instance. So usually related to the Toronto police, in the sense that they're not really under anybody's authority. So it's a hint in the fact that at the same time that's like my Sister Moko was saying that that's written. This is 4th edition or whatever, so that's early 1900s. There's still the definition of the word more as a general term, English language word more, right? So that means that they're trying to tell you something in terms of your status.
And then also too, relative to the officer, that it should be expected that if somebody's an officer, that they have an office. And if they don't have an office, they're probably an imposter. Because every officer has an office, which is what the more definition is also related to. That the officer in the Isle of Man has an office. So if we say police officer or officer of the court, there should be somewhere that they're going to that's their jurisdiction. Yeah, bailiff.
The bailiff that does eviction,
Yeah,
they have their office.
So in other words, they can be reached by the people, right? So that's in terms of And that the significance is that they're liable to a certain population because you have an elected official, that person has an office too, and they're liable to everybody who votes in their election. So that's in essence like a power that they have their authority. Yeah, that's what we want.
Yeah, bailiff actually has quite a few different definitions. It talks about bailiff, has the connotative, the Middle English, and then the ancient. It also mentions over here bailiff of 100. So connotatively, one who has some authority, care, guardianship, or jurisdiction is delivered, committed, or entrusted. One who is deputized or appointed to take charge of another's affair, an overseer or a superintendent, a keeper, protector, or guardian, a steward.
Read that over one more time.
One to whom some authority, care, guardianship, or jurisdiction is delivered, committed, or entrusted. One who is deputized or appointed to take charge of another's affair, an overseer or superintendent, a keeper, protector, or guardian.
And so a bailiff. This is again why, with Noah's example about the evictions, that a bailiff is really supposed to be a sheriff's deputy, because the sheriff is the one who's really supposed to be doing the evictions. But because they don't have any sheriffs here, they put a quote unquote bailiff in an office and call it office of the sheriff. But that's not really a sheriff, that's Metro Police guy. Has nothing to do with sheriff. So once the corporate jurisdictions started taking over, they started getting rid of all the positions that the people had access to. So got rid of sheriff, got rid of emperors and put them into kings, got rid of the deputy, created bailiffs. But again, if a bailiff is deputized, then that means that a sheriff is who is over the bailiff. And then sheriff comes from sharif, which is really us, not the guy with the 7-point star or whatever, right? Or 6-point star. The sheriff is really the Moors, which is why the 6-point star is used for the sheriff, because the 6-point star is really our symbology. Good.
The a little bit older definition reads a magistrate who formally administered justice in parliaments or courts of France, answering to the English sheriffs, as mentioned by Bradford. A little bit older than that, a person acting in a ministerial capacity who has by delivery the custody and administration of lands or goods for the benefit of the owner or bailiff, and is liable to render an account thereof. Oldest definition goes bailiff, one who has charge of lands, goods, and chattels of another to make the best profit for the owner, and to have his reasonable charges and expenses deducted, and is accountable for profits he reasonably might have made. Skipping some other bailiff of franchises, skipping bailiff of manor, high bailiff, special bailiff, going to bailiff of hundreds. In English law, officers appointed over hundreds by the sheriffs to collect fines therein and to summon juries, to attend the judges and justices at the assizes and order sessions, and to execute writs and process in the several hundreds.
That was clear with the definitions.
So basically, a Moor is just your relation to other dimensions.
You
Like, in
could,
that sense?
yeah, you could look at it like that.
And like any, who can assume the name of the Moor? So if I'm a melanated man and I have no nationality, I can assume the name of the Moor because I have dark skin. And let's connect them back to Northwest Africa.
And I wouldn't even say that they have to assume it. That's what they are. They just don't know that that's what they're, because they're on the land,
And
regardless of the land. Because Filipinos, they call themselves Moro.
they call themselves
Moro.
Moros?
Moro,
Okay.
which is Moro. Now when you check them, they're dark skinned and then they're Islamic, just like Moors.
And in Jamaica, they call them Maroon.
Mhm.
So it's like, you know,
Right.
Right? Yeah. And then on the other side of it, that's why all the Europeans are Freemasons. And then they wear a fez in secret, and they never wear the fez out here unless they're doing some type of parade or whatever, because they're really pretending to be the Moors, since the Moors don't want to be themselves.
and it's the thing too with our people. We, when it comes to the Moors, when they question it, it seems so difficult because we're thinking it's a different nation or a different set of people or special people or whatever. It's just simple. The same Negro black colored people, they are the Moors. Simple like that. The same Negro black and colored people, they are the Moors. Now you see what's happening, you're gonna do brown people, not black anymore. They're changing it to brown people these days. Same one, same one.
And then it's anybody that's dark skinned, but especially the African Negro. So anybody that's dark skinned is more, but especially the African Negro, even more than anybody else. And then that's why we're the ones that's misclassified and nobody else is misclassified. Because if they're not attaching to more, then they're attaching to their nationality. Right? So like for example, in the East Asian culture, they had a Mauryan dynasty.
Sure.
Mauryan. And those are, you know, and when you go to Ceylon or Sri Lanka, they have Moors there. And then the Punjabs have a temple that's built with Moorish architecture in Punjab. Now, why wouldn't they build it in Indian architecture? Taj Mahal is built for Moorish architecture. Why would they do that?
That's the person I guess.
They have to accept some type of acknowledgement or connection to the Moors in order to build their things with Moorish architecture. Right? Got a question? Oh. Any other questions? You got some more, sis? Feel free to throw them up.
Go back to the 7,
Mm.
where we're verifying the different things about the 7.
Yeah.
It's also for the mothers, that's the cycle they have. And it goes along with the moon too. It's the moon every 7 days it change. Every 7-day mother cycle change. So part of it is
Everything's relative. If you have the Holy Quran, we're looking at chapter 5. Since we had Confucius bring up, we'll read chapter 5 just to put this in perspective. Fanchi left him, and meeting with Zai Hai, he said, I had an interview just now with the master, and I asked him what wisdom is. In his answer, he said, lift up the straight, set aside the crooked, so you can make the crooked straight. What was this meaning? So chapter 5, after the feast, the homeward journey, the missing Jesus, the search for him, his parents find him in the temple. He goes with them to Nazareth, symbolic meaning of the carpenter's tools. The great feast of Pasch was ended, and the Nazarenes were journeying toward their homes. And they were in Samaria, and Mary said, where is my son? No one had seen the boy. And Joseph sought among their kindred who were on their way to Galilee. But they had not seen him not. But they had seen him not. Then Joseph, Mary, and the son of Zebedee returned and sought through all Jerusalem, but could not find him. And Mary asked the guards, had they seen Jesus, a little boy about 12 years old? The guards replied, yes, he is in the temple now, disputing with the doctors of the law. And they went in and found him as the guards had said. And Mary said, why, Jesus, why do you treat your parents thus? We have sought 2 days for you. We feared that some great harm had overtaken you. And Jesus said, do you not know that I must be about my Father's work? But he went around and pressed the hand of every doctor of the law and said, I trust that we meet again. And then he went forth with his parents on their way to Nazareth. And when they reached their home, he wrought with Joseph as a carpenter. One day, as he was bringing forth tools for work, he said, these tools remind me of the ones we handle in the workshop of the mind, where things are made of thoughts and where we build up character. We use the square to measure all of our lines, to straighten out the crooked places of the way, and make the corners of our conduct square. We use the compass to draw the circles around our passions and desires to keep them in the bounds of righteousness. We use the axe to cut away the knotty, useless, and ungainly parts and make the character symmetrical. We use the hammer to drive home the truth and pound it in until it is a part of every part. We use the plane to smooth the rough, uneven surfaces of joint and block and board that go to build the temple of the truth. The chisel, line and plummet, and the saw have their uses in the workshop of the mind. And then this ladder, with its trinity of steps, faith, hope, and love, on it we climb up to the dome of purity and life. And on the 12-step ladder, we ascend until we reach the pinnacle of that which life is spent to build the temple of perfected man. Islam. Right. These tools remind me of the ones we handle in the workshop of the mind, where things are made of thoughts and where we build up character. We use the square to measure all of our lines, to straighten out the crooked places of the way, and to make the corners of our conduct square. We use the compass to draw the circles around our passions and desires and keep them in the bounds of righteousness. And this is why the Freemasons have their compass and the square as their symbol, right? Which is why they have the apron, because the apron is supposed to be covering their lower self, so they can to force them to raise themselves to higher degrees. But the highest degrees that they can to get to is 33 degrees, even though there's 96 degrees or whatever Masons as well. But those are select people. That's not everybody in a lodge that gets to those higher level of degrees. Now, once they get to those degrees, then they're international Masons that they're not just limited to their lodge. They're Masons everywhere that they go. We use the axe to cut away the naughty, useless, and ungainly parts and make the character of our symmetrical, to make the character symmetrical. So that's why in fascism, they have the axe inside a bundle of sticks held together so that the axe can't be used. And once you're not using the axe to cut away the naughty, useless, and ungainly parts, then the naughty, useless, and ungainly parts is what it's going to be. Hence fascism, using that symbol, because they're not within the bounds of righteousness. They're not within harmony of nature. They're about pillaging and destruction and whatever else that comes with fascism. Use the hammer to drive home the truth and pound it in until it is a part of every part. We use the plane to smooth the rough, uneven surfaces of joint and block and board that go to build the temple for the truth. The chisel, line and plummet, and the saw have their uses in the workshops of the mind. And on the 12-step ladder, we ascend until we reach the pinnacle, that which life is spent to build a temple of perfected man. So as you learn your lessons, you can look at the 12-step ladder as all the different gates that you come through. Every time you leave here and come back here, there's another being. You're coming through on another gate. As you come through on all these different gates, once you go through all the 12 gates, once you, they even use the example of Jacob's ladder. Once you climb Jacob's ladder, once you go through the levels of enlightenment, then you get to, they also call it sevenfold path or 12-fold path. You know, again, the relevance of these numbers, 5s, 7s, 9s, 12s, being relative to some type of spiritual connection to you finding out your true self, finding out your divinity, etc.
And on the side note, too, with those numbers, where you're standing on your square, you have your coccyx at the bottom, like you see that as one unit. And your sacrum is another unit. You have your lumbar vertebrae at the bottom, that's 5 units, so that's 2 and 5. You have the 12th thoracic vertebrae, which creates your base. You have your 7 cervical vertebrae here. That still uses the 2-5 principle, the 12 and the 7 principle. So everything, when you're studying this, it's also reflected inside of this as well, more than one dimension.
Yeah.
In that, they call it a Fibonacci sequence.
Mm-hmm. Right.
1 plus 1 is 2. 1 plus 2 is 3. 3 plus 2 is 5. 5 plus 3 is 8. So up to that point, it falls in line with this Fibonacci. Even 5 and 7 is 12.
And then that sequence being reflected in the spiraling of things.
Yeah, the spiral nature, fractal nature is the everything is spiral.
Again with the going back to the tools again. Chapter 6, Life and Works of Jesus in India among the Muslims. A royal prince of India, Ravana in the south, was met at the Jewish feast. Ravana was a man of wealth, and he was just, and with a band of Brahmic priests sought wisdom in the west. When Jesus stood among the Jewish priests and read and spoke, Ravana heard and was amazed. And when he asked who Jesus was, from whence he came, and what he was, Chief Hillel said, "We call this the day star from on high, for he has come to bring to men a light, the light of life, to lighten up the way of men and redeem his people of Israel." And Hillel told Ravana all about the child, about the prophecies concerning him, about the wonders of the night when he was born, and about the Magian priests, about the way in which he was protected from the wrath of evil men, about his flight in Egypt, and how he then was serving with his father as a carpenter in Nazareth. Ravana was entranced and asked to know the way to Nazareth that he might go and honor such a one as Son of Allah. And with his gorgeous train he journeyed and came to Nazareth of Galilee. He found the object of his search engaging in building dwelling for the sons of men. And when he first saw Jesus, he was climbing up a 12-step ladder, and he carried in his hands a compass, square, and axe. And so they're relating that he went to the workshops of the mind, he did his work, and now he's a living example now of this evolutionary process. Because now he's not just teaching about it now he has the compass and the square and the axe now. And somebody else is bearing witness to this. And the individual bearing witness to this is, like they say, a man of wealth or whatever that wants to know who is this individual that they're speaking of so highly. Ravana said, "All hail, most favored son of heaven." And at the end, Ravana made a feast for all the people of the town. And Jesus and his parents were the honored guests. For certain days, Ravana was a guest in Joseph's home on Marmion Way. He sought to learn the secret of the wisdom of the son, but it was all too great for him. And then he asked that he might be a patron of the child, might take him to the east, where he could learn the wisdom of the Brahmins. And Jesus longed to go, that he might learn, and after many days his parents gave consent. Then, with proud heart, Ravana with his train began the journey toward the rising sun. And after many days, they crossed the sand and reached the provinces of Orissa and the palace of the prince. The Brahmin priests were glad to welcome home the prince. With favor, they received the Jewish boy. And Jesus was accepted as a pupil in the temple of Jagannath, and he had learned the Vedas and the Manic law. The Brahmic priests wondered at the clear conceptions of the child, and often were amazed when he explained to them the meaning of the law. And again, the Holy Quran of the Moorish Science Temple of America goes into the 18 years of Jesus's life that they didn't have in any of the Bible scriptures. So once you get these lessons, you start realizing that, oh, he wasn't just son of God because he was born of a Virgin Mary or whatever. He was son of God because he went all around the world and studied from all the high priests. He studied from anybody and everybody who had some supreme level of knowledge. He sat at their feet to go learn. And on the other side of it, they were learning from him because everybody knew of the prophecy. of the quote unquote young Jewish boy who was Allah in man. And everybody who met him realized the wisdom and acknowledged and appreciated the lessons that was given to them from him. And then that's the same thing with Confucius and Muhammad and Buddha and going down the line of all the prophets. That they were, teachers, but they were also students. They were masters, but they were also servants. And there was not a egotistical position taken from the prophets. They always took the humble position of, I don't know anything. Man's gonna come do more stuff than I'm doing right now. If you think I'm doing something, wait till, and again, go back to Drew Ali with, Moors are gonna come with their eyes wide open, seeing and knowing, and they're gonna carry out the law that I lay down. Don't worry about what I'm talking about. You just wait for those Moors who are on the way. Any comments, questions?
Actually, I just have one last question.
Oh, don't worry, you could have more than that.
It's a really good question, but does the Moorish Science Temple recognize any seasonal holy days
Those you recognize?
and seasonal holy days?
Well, with if you look into brother Abdullah Bey, he has a lot of good lectures on YouTube, putting that into perspective. That the quote unquote seasonal holy days don't belong to Europeans or whatever. So Christmas is winter solstice celebration, not Santa Claus and whatever. Thanksgiving is equinox celebration, not Europeans came here and then they gave the Indians whatever. So a lot of his lectures that deal with the science of masonry and stuff like that go into things like that.
So my school doesn't recognize like equinoxes and solstices.
Yeah. We acknowledge it. We recognize it. Yeah.
Instead of the one we have.
Yeah. Instead of what they say, we just do it for that part of it. Yeah.
Good Friday, it's a holy day. We call it Friday.
Yeah. And again, we that was part of a lot of Moors. Give thanks for Abdullah, because a lot of Moors that were coming into the information prior to really getting into his works or him presenting that information would disregard those days because we thought it was a European whatever like that. And, why should we celebrate Christmas, and that's not our stuff or whatever, but ultimately it's really our stuff. And it's a good opportunity for us to take our information that we have and go to these, celebrations where our people are at that don't have knowledge, or our friends, family, whatever, and use it as an opportunity to put them onto some info. Sis? The truth about? You can talk louder, it's all right. Santa Claus? So there's when the when we were in power, right? The story goes that Black Pete, who was a brother that looked like us, he used to be the one that used to go around giving the gifts to the children and stuff like that, right? Santa Claus, where Santa Claus comes from, used to be a demon that used to kidnap children. So what they did is what they took the story of Black Pete, put it on Santa Claus, and then had people think that Santa Claus is the one who, you know, the reason why Santa Claus wants to know if you're naughty or nice and all that stuff, because he's going to kidnap you. It's not because he's going to bring some presents. Right? Yeah. And then the other part of it, Santa and Satan are the same people too. And then, you know, for people who are in apartments or people who are on the islands, they already know that this was some BS because they know reindeer. I know reindeers in Jamaica. Yeah. When the sled's on sand or whatever, you know something's going on. Right? So Santa Claus comes from Santa Claus, and then you can look this up. And if you look up Santa Claus, you will know nothing to do with Santa Claus. Just Google Santa Claus, he'll come up, and then Google Black Pete, and then you'll see him dressed up with the hat, with the pom and all that stuff, with the bag of presents and all that. Yeah.
So sorry, so then again, the same Black Pete, but I have a day that was celebrated. It's the darkest day on the planet Earth. The darkest day.
The day that.
When the Black Pete celebrated, go around and share this.
Right. Well, it's the same. It's the same thing with the solstice, because when you have 21st, 22nd, 23rd, right? Or they say 22nd, 23rd, 24th would be the days leading up to the sun being at its lowest point, and that's why it's the darkest. It's not because of something evil or whatever. It's just the sun doing its motions, right? And then after the 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th, then the sun start rising again. Hence, Son of God rising out of the tomb and all that stuff, because they're really talking about astrology and not the guy that, you know, got killed by the Romans and then he's in the tomb and then he moved the thing with his mind and then he walked out. See my hands, I'm the guy. That's not, yeah. Right? Even Jesus walking on water is the sun reflecting off the water. Is really, you know, so, yeah. Any other questions? You got something for us there, Yasu? Oh, all right. That's how you pull it out. I thought you had another one. Okay. I got another one going. Any other questions? Yeah, or comments?
Yeah,
Please feel free to throw those out.
reflecting that on the fact that the sister asked about the holidays and about Santa Claus, like, you know, you asked in terms of the Moore Science Temple, and the answer is, the hint is there because of the word science. Right, so science, so it's equinox, but scientific. there's so that to come at a certain time. The darkest day of the year, that's winter solstice, the longest day of the year, the summer solstice. So they're scientific. Right? So it's not actually, when you say temple, more science temple, it's not a temple as a place of worship or a temple as a place of study. And the science that you're studying is more science. And more science is a way of saying the perspective of the human without all the biases of the past 6,000 years of people who took knowledge down instead of taking it up, took knowledge, shortened knowledge instead of expanding knowledge. Right? That's more science. More science is really how a human being is supposed to look at life. But because people with a shortened myopic view have had certain power and control, because people who had the science, got into internal struggles. So now what is considered science is only a limited science. Whereas more science doesn't say maybe there's something in between you and I in this air, different molecules and things going on that we can't see. We know that's a fact because the science tells us, the science that comes from the seven, and that's governed under those seven, because we know that there's only seven. So once it comes under those seven, then it's real. Right? And then if there's evidence for it and it comes under the seven, then there's no doubt that it's real. But the scientific community that exists now doesn't necessarily go that way. They might want something that shows up in a certain machine, or they want something that they can put in, and mix together in two chemicals and have the color change or something like that. You understand? They want specific types of evidence, whereas evidence is evidence, right? And law is law. So also in that sense, that's where culture more is related to your science and it's related to your government, your law, right? And it's also related to your faith. Because we don't believe in, ghosts and phantoms, but we do know the seven, right? And we follow the seven. So it's a matter of faith, because faith is what you know is going to happen, right? So if you know that something is under a condition of those seven, and you know what the outcome is going to be based on those seven, then you have faith, right? You have faith that something's going to turn out a certain way based on those seven laws. So now your faith is scientific. So it's the best type of faith to have. In fact, that's the only real faith. Real faith is scientific. Real faith never fails. Right? So that's why there's a 3-step ladder: is belief, faith, fruition. Right? As the more you're not a believer, you're faithful. And so believers will never test you, because you don't have the doubt that they have. Doesn't matter what their position is. Believers can get far in this world, but they cannot step to when someone who's faithful. Someone who's faithful doesn't waver in front of a believer.
I always looked at faith and belief as the same thing.
No.
They're always
I mean, yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah. Because I feel like when we look at the situation of faith, it's almost having a belief in something without the evidence. And so I was looking at some of the context, looking for factual information, so I would be able to form this like faith that we feel is based on beliefs.
Yes. So faith can be based off belief, but like I said, if your beliefs are scientific in nature, then your faith is based on the essence of all science, which is the seven. Right? That's why that number is so crucial. But once you can boil it down to seven, you don't need to go through a long, infinite checklist of if this, then that, different aspects of the situation or a thing to determine whether it's real or not, to determine the truth about it. Right? It has to fall under those 17.
I also think that they reverse the script. They have you using your faith to back up your beliefs. So it's really your beliefs that are what turn into the faith, right? Because you're saying it's your faith that backs up your beliefs, but it's really your beliefs
that then become and are proven to be the things that you have faith in. That's how I sort of see it, right?
Yeah, but
From that perspective.
and also, so there's this part of the circle sentence around that says, belief is what man thinks perhaps is real. Right? So,
No, that's what I'm saying. That's what.
Yeah, we'll just put it up for those who might not have read it before. So chapter 7, verse 25. Lamas asks, pray, what is...
What did you
So chapter 7, verse 25.
say? Exactly. 7 on 7. Right?
Yeah. Lamas asks, pray, what is faith? And Jesus said, faith is the surety of the omnipotence of Allah and man, the certainty that man will reach deific life. Salvation is a ladder reaching from the heart of man to the heart of Allah. It has 3 steps. Belief is first, and this is what man thinks perhaps is truth. And faith is next. This is what man knows is truth. Fruition is the last, and this is man himself the truth. Belief is lost in faith, and in fruition, faith is lost. And man is saved when he has reached deific life, and when he and Allah are one.
They work together. Faith and belief. They work
yeah.
together. Transition.
It wasn't just agreement. But yeah, that one there, you can just takes time to really digest it and really take it in, read it over and over, because it really really nails and answers that question.
Yeah.
Well, how many people that are in belief and faith state are brought up to the 3rd degree of fruition?
Right.
That's the thing.
Yeah, and that's what I mean by when you're in line with the 7, then you're gonna get the result that you're supposed to get.
Yeah.
You're gonna get to that fruition.
Fruition is the result.
Yeah.
Of the two others, right?
Yeah, that's why those could be damaging if you don't have the third.
Yeah.
But if you have the third one in place, then you know that that's where your goal is. And those are the stepping stones towards that. When I see the third one only comes after the first 2 had sort of
Then mastered.
have sort of played out.
Yeah.
Fruition is the result of first of all your belief. Let's say you believe in Santa Claus. Well, that's a belief. And then you realize that Santa Claus isn't there. The faith is that there is something powerful in that period of time, right? That would be this the winter solstice. Out of that then comes the power, let's say, of that gate to be fruition. That's how I would see it as an example. Right? The belief is Santa Claus, this magical guy who comes and gives you stuff. Yeah. You realize that's all bullshit. It's really about the solstice and the fact that it's this powerful time.
Right.
That's the faith. That's the knowledge that stuff is there.
And the faith is, I hope mom and dad have enough finance so I can get my bike.
Right.
Santa Claus ain't bringing it.
They're going to find finance.
Yeah.
But that's what I was just going to say too. Like, there's like a scale kind of. And faith is in the middle, and then belief is here, and fruition's over here. Right. And faith has both of them in it. But some people sway more side when they get to the faith side. Now they sway more back
to the belief. Yeah, they don't go up.
Belief manner,
right.
As we're saying, as hope.
Yeah.
As hoping, right? Yeah. The fruition part of that faith is what you're saying, as saying, well, I know that they're going to get that fiat to get what I need, right? The hope is like still like I was always taught belief. Belief is leaving room for doubt, right?
Mm.
It's like me telling you, or you telling me something behind vision where I can't see right now. I'm just accepting your word for it instead of maybe getting up and taking the action to look for myself and putting it into action with that fruition. Now I know, right? And then I start acting like what I know, so then I become what I know.
Right.
So there's no reason for me to think about whether, right? So there's no doubt anymore. But faith is like it could sway you back to conducting or operating in belief or operating in fruition. Because you're saying we're saying it's a state, right? People from belief to faith, fruition. But that's not how it always goes. People go from belief to faith, and then they're stuck in faith because it's the wrong
a distorted type of faith, or it's an elementary form of faith, which is in belief.
Yeah. Low high level of belief.
But the issue behind that is because if you're believing in something that is not going to come to fruition, then you will never reach fruition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why this
Right? That's the thing. I believe in Santa Claus. You're never going to see Santa Claus.
Yeah. But unless you go to the mall on the
You might see more than one.
come bring your children, sit on my lap. And then one more thing with regard to the celebration or whatever. Moors to celebrate birthday of founder. This was in the this one, not in the one. There's that's not the one I was looking for. Hold on.
Before I came into this knowledge and I knew about fruition and anything like that, I never really heard the term before I came into this knowledge.
Yeah.
It was always like, in Rastafari faith and certain other faiths, it was belief, faith, and knowing. Right? There was no fruition, it was knowing. Right? And in the Quran, it'll tell you like, faith is belief, or faith in what you know, or belief in what you know of someone. Right? So knowing is that kind of transition. So like saying
So I would say that faith is knowledge.
Well, that's the second half that I'm reading and talk about.
Yeah.
That Trinity has its itself a counterpart.
that's what I'm saying.
Higher self, and the adept, the son, and the master, which replaces belief, which replaces faith, and replaces religion.
Right? Because knowing is not the last thing. Fruition has to be the last thing because you could know it and but then not act it, right? Yeah, right. Not go through it, right? It's like as a pointer, right? The pointer of a block of wood is pointing the direction of something, right? If you're pointing the way, you gotta be able to lead the way as well, right? You can't just point it.
Yeah.
So knowing, like, I used to watch G.I. Joe when I was a youth. It's a cartoon, army cartoon called G.I. Joe. We made movies of it the past couple of years. But the last thing they used to say in every single episode is G.I. Joe, Great American Hero. And right before they say that, they're saying knowing is half the battle. Every episode.
Yeah.
Right? And then later on in my studies, like knowledge is nothing without application. Right? So if you don't put it into effect, you don't put it into work, if you have potential with no kinetic, it doesn't make any sense. Right?
And then
potential, but you have no movement with it, there's no movement, right? You have positive flow with no negative flow, can't work.
And then in Freemasonry, that's what they call speculative masonry versus operative. So the speculative masons are the ones who just do the rituals and they just go through the motions, and then the operative are the ones who masonry is bigger than the lodge. Masonry is dealing with the science of what it is. What do the pillars mean? What does the compass and square mean? You know, what are the symbols for? What are the rituals for? You know, why does the guy get blindfolded? What's the motions of it? You know, there's the knowledge of it and the application of it. Without applying the knowledge,
Those two words, they're just an operate,
yeah,
right? Spectate and operate.
and operate. Either spectate or operate.
And then that's relative to what you already said, all more active, not
Active, not passive. Exactly.
So like if I have the bus stop and I believe that the bus is stopping, I always probably start walking. But I believe that the bus is stopping. But if I know, I would probably wait. Yeah.
Or if you believe it's coming and it's not coming, you're gonna wait instead of walking.
I believe it's coming.
If you believe it's coming, but it already passed, or it's 1:30.
Right.
You come out from the club or whatever. Oh yeah, the bus is on its way. I'm just gonna stand here. I'm gonna wait.
I believe it's coming.
You believe it's coming.
It's gone already.
They're already gone, or it's not even. Or it's not even coming.
Now you're dabbling in faith there now. Because now you know that it's scheduled to reach at 1:30, but it hasn't gotten there yet. But this is what the schedule said, and usually every day like clockwork, it reaches at that time. So based off your experience and your action, you have you're having faith that, you know what, no, this bus usually reaches at this time. So I kind of know, but you don't know, right? You kind of know it's supposed to reach at this time. So he's saying that you're going to wait based off of what you feel you know, off of that belief, right? But the bus ain't there yet, so you don't actually know until it reaches, right? But if it didn't reach at 1:30, then you know it hasn't reached. But like he's saying, you don't know, depending, and it's so much little factors. It depends how much time you're waiting here.
I think that's the whole point of the spiritual nature of it, is that if Joel is your prophet, then you're supposed to have belief in the spiritual aspect of life, belief in Allah, right? So your faith is for things that you can know. If you can't really know it, you yourself and your brain, then you can't. There's no point of having faith. So it's a good example because it shows that faith is for spiritual things, and that you know. If all you know is Allah, that's enough. And if you have faith in that, then you make it happen, right? And then that's the whole thing of listening to your inner voice. That's intuition, right? That's isonomy, right? That's the Allah and man. Whereby there's certain spiritual people who don't know anything about anything. They just meditate all day. If you're observing walking through life, even in an area that they're not familiar with, something's always working their way. Things are always just working out for them. And if they're truly faithful, they don't doubt. So it's almost like you skip this concept of knowing. Because they didn't really sound like they picked up a book and read and figured out, okay, this, and when this sign shows up, it means I can walk across the street, or it's just they believe, maybe not in every little detail of their journey, but that, next month I gotta be in Buenos Aires. And I'm just gonna walk from here to there in my robe and whatever, and I have faith that I'll get there. All the little details is just, you could say, a matter of belief. And so you skip from belief to fruition because you just do it. But what it really is a lie, because faith is that part of knowing not necessarily that this decision is the right decision, but that Allah is in me and Allah is giving me that feeling that it's right.
So whatever
every step along the road
is the path I'm supposed to take regardless.
So you feel that your faith and your belief is always within the 7 principles, setting hermetic principles?
As a more, or as
As being a part of the Muslim temple. It's always within that science.
I think what I would say is that those principles are always in activity. That would be the faith. Those things are always happening. Whether you believe they're happening or not, those 7 hermetic principles are
always happen.
Always in activity.
they always just real quick, they always prove themselves.
Absolutely.
Which is why they're worth studying and breaking down to understand that you can apply them to physical life and then see if they apply them to the sciences themselves, apply them to biology, to chemistry, to physics, and you'll realize, oh, okay.
So I have this, they're saying that at any one time, there's 2,000 or 5 million bits of information happening. Your brains can only interpret a certain amount of it. What this sort of stuff, from my perspective, is allowing you the filters so you can see what those things are. So when you get up and you're thinking about someone and they call you, that might be, whatever it is, right? Correspond. So what happens is, once you're able to put those filters on, then you see life. You hopefully are able to then get yourself in tune with things, and it helps you get in tune with those things. And this is what this is saying, that ultimately we're all on that journey back to the source. And that by then having those right filters, it helps you get through there. whether you acknowledge those whether you acknowledge those things happening or not, they are happening to you. When you don't acknowledge them, that's when I think life becomes difficult for you. Right? And this is what I think more science is. It's about helping to help clear out all of the confusion to allow you so that you know, like if you're one friend and they're saying they want to go to the club, yet you kind of really want to go to the club, and then your other friend saying he wants to go to the library. More science tells you, I'm going to the library, in a sense, right? So that's how I see what more science is about. It's about helping you. It's a guidebook, like this Quran, for making the right choices. And then when you're at the crossroads, you pick this up and you apply those things like seven hermetic principles.
Yeah.
And they
They work. They work. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the fruition is what happens in your life out of that.
Right. And even going back to the fruition and the bus example, that outside of the belief and the fruition, it's about man being, right? So opposed to waiting for the bus, your thought has somebody ride up. Hey, what are you doing at the bus stop 1:30 or whatever like that? Then take you where you need to go. And that's the fruition part of it. And then if you can do that instinctively, at the thought, just like you said, like think about somebody to call you, the phone's ringing, right? And it's who you thought about. If we could do that with everything, that's being, right? That's being back in, yeah. It just comes in spurts, Right. Any other closing comments or questions?
I have a final question.
Sure. No worries. You're good.
This question is just for you. You were just reading the Hermetic principles. But the word Hermetic comes from Chinese and Greek, from Egypt, from taught. So some of the signs of more science comes from Egypt. Yes.
Yeah. But see, like when people travel, how long do people travel for? When you travel, how long do you travel for? Yeah. How long does Mama's river travel?
7 hours.
No, how long do you stay?
How long did I stay? 30 days.
Okay. You Ali left the Americas when he was around 60, and he came back when he was around 26 years old. He was on that side of the world for 10 years. 10 years. But fruition, action, started putting in the work. He was born a prophet, he knew he was a prophet, and he didn't just walk around the prophet. So you won't know. 10 years from 16 to 26.
Like he knew he had a responsibility, so he had to make sure he was able to carry all his work, like at the most highest level. Like, I'm not gonna wait for anything. I don't want to go acquire all the knowledge and make sure that I'm prepared to give it.
In Egypt, right? So he went to Egypt. He went to Mecca, he was there. And so that, coming back now, he still studied under certain people who were already in the United States once he got back. He continued to humble himself. He didn't push it, even though he was young. But that was like in that time average, right? By the time 1916, 17 starts the old thing, 1915 starts the old Canaan Temple, that's his own organization. And he's 27 years old. Right? So they're like the reality of his life is one such that when he was doing what he was doing, there wasn't really anything in his way. Because the knowledge that he gained in seclusion, you might say, right, off the record, outside of there, that's why he said when I was coming back, they were looking for me with dreadnoughts. Those are submarines, wartime submarines. Right, but they didn't find it. Like they didn't stop him from getting his feet back on soil here. And once his feet were back, that's it. Because he's in more than he was. That was the only, in other words, he was telling us that was their only opportunity to stop him. And they didn't. And most people don't realize that. Most people, unfortunately, from our perspective, we don't realize how powerful we are and how powerful some of our ancestors used to be and how they used to move and do and operate. We just assume coming from slavery and then, okay, so we just have to slowly build up and make headway. And yeah, in a way, in a sense, for some lineages, some people, but by 1886, Drew Ali, where he was born on Cherokee Reservation, grew up seeing certain things, and then, 15, 16, like I said, going to the East for 10 years, he became so masterful, he was beyond what anybody could have. He was a mastermind amongst even those people in the United States government or wherever else who would have tried to stop him or wanted to stop him. He was already a mastermind beyond that. You know what I'm saying? Because he was studying these things and he was studying them raw. It's like that era, if you know about that era of time in Egypt, that's when they were digging stuff up, but there wasn't as much authority and red tape and bureaucracy as there is now. They were digging stuff up and you just walk onto the site and pick stuff up. There were grave robberies all the time. It was like a Wild West. And that's the time that he was in Egypt, in his university in Egypt. That's the time that he was in Mecca. That's the time that he existed. The Ottoman Empire still existed. The Austro-Hungarian Empire still existed.
So I asked that because I was curious of the studies that come with the sciences that come from Egypt, and so part of what Egypt or what they would do in Egypt is they would align a lot of their pyramids with the Orion star system, and then what they do in Washington is they align with the Pacific star system. And that is a 6-pointed star system with one in the middle, so it has 5 points, so it's a pentagram. And so I've heard the saying that the star that's on the flag of the Moors is actually a pentagram in line with the Pleiadian star system, not Orion, in line with what they were doing in Egypt. So I don't know what the 5, the love, truth, peace, justice, and freedom. What are those 5 sayings come from, 5 beliefs come from, and why a pentagram for the Mormons?
Well, one place for a reference, George G.M. James and his book Stolen Legacy. George G.M. James got Masonic assassination, cut his tongue out and all that because of what he was talking about with regard to the connection between Egypt and the Moors, which is supposed to be not information that's for public consumption, especially people who look like us. What he goes on to say in Stolen Legacy is that when Egypt fell, the Moors became the custodians of the ancient mysteries of Egypt. So when you talk about
Moors or the Masons?
the Moors, so when you talk about Hermes, and you relate that to Greek, and then you relate that to Thoth, really that's Tahuti, right? And then Tahuti had his colonies, Tahuti had colonies in Atlantis that they don't talk about either when you deal with Egypt. And that Egyptians used to come over here. This is why there's pyramids here too, because all of it is one culture. But if they get people to restrict, quote unquote, Egypt to over there, then you miss half of the story. Now, Drew Ali teaches us that the 5 points on the star represent those principles: love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. So each point represents one of the 5 principles, which is why the flag has the 5-point star. When we go further into it, astrologically, the only star, the only system that makes this in the universe is Venus, right? And then that's why the star is green.
On the point of Earth, when you look at it in the map, it does that. So that's also an ancient camp or Tamar or what people call Egypt.
That's why we use the law principle in that too, right? As far as the arms, yeah.
Right.
Because it symbolizes you as your 5 points as well, right?
Leg, leg, arm, head. Or head, or arm, leg, arm. Any way you look at it, it's the same thing. Right? Going from the perspective of the actual image, right? And then this is why now too, that when you look at the pentagram, the pentagram is the same shape as the Pentagon, which is the United States quote unquote government building. Just without that on it. But then why would it be that? Because Benjamin Banneker designed Washington and he was a Moor.
The reason why those stuff like those mapping of whatever those ley lines or whatever the maps all the certain stars and stuff and happens over there and happens over there because it's saying it's one post and design. It might be 2 different systems on certain levels, but the basic principles are the same. The basic concepts are the same thing, right? So like more science to me, you're saying you see something more science of right, like that knowledge question. That's just based in more science period. And more science is like everything. Whatever knowledge there is out there, it trickles down from a quote unquote black person, which we refer to as a Moor, whether you're from the Americas, Africa,
Asia,
whatever continent you're from. We brought that knowledge to whatever other culture was there. Or we left it, it was corrupted, we went back and tried to clean it up, or not, or got distorted, but everything trickled down from that one umbrella. So that's why we say everything is more science, regardless if it's part of the temple or not. I think that even Scientology study more science, like Hinduism, Buddhism,
more science.
Christianity, modern day Islam, Judaism, they all have more science. But it's like math, right? Math is math. Or if we take our mathematics is math. And then there's different branches of it, different divisions of people create calculus, they create finance, create algebra, right? And then math is adding math, multiplying math, dividing math, subtracting math. But it's still math. Right? So that's kind of the concept of more science is everything. It's the umbrella of every knowledge that's on the planet. Right? And at the time, we might not have been calling ourselves more, some of us, right? But we were always more. At certain times of your combo, like in Egypt, whatever the high priest were calling us. And everybody didn't identify with it, but we were still that. We were all melanated beings on the planet, which were referred to as more, whether you're from Africa or whatever.
It's interesting that you're speaking about ancient Egypt again and the high priest. Sometimes we don't even realize how great the prophet was, right? Because just the reference you made of the high priest, they would go into the temples at the age of 7 and they'd come out at 47. So they had to study for 40 years before they could come out and keep counsel, you know? And the fact that our prophet was in the East only for 10 years, the amount of knowledge that he had to accumulate in that period, bring it back, it's phenomenal. It's like the more you study, the more you sort of, you're just so astounded by how much knowledge that he did bring back and how quickly he applied it. Or maybe,
I think it was him, but that's where it gets triggered now.
well, that's the kind of thing I'm saying, yeah.
Because even now to my own self, by studying, I couldn't even think back when I was small, some things that I heard didn't mean anything. And now I realize it.
Yes.
See how long I know it?
Yeah.
Not just now, but I know it so long, but it didn't mean anything. Now when I'm the level that I'm at, oh,
trigger.
Like the context.
So like, it's not means I didn't just learn that it was in Milan and we never executed and do anything. But
That's like our Akashic records, right? Like, that was something we were probably already told.
Yeah.
But we have stuff, all the information already in our DNA. And
there's this one that was told.
yeah, that was just one that was told to order. But we have all this stuff in our DNA already, and it just needs something to trigger it to activate it, and we make it. You know, the universe, a lot helps to make that connection, whether we know it or not. If we can do it or not, know how to make that connection, it just naturally happens.
You see the little bit that you were told. Now the bigger piece that we're hearing now, it also helps to connect this little piece. That you further learn.
Islam. So we got next Sunday we're going to be doing our first annual harvest celebration. You know, just have some food and just be easy. We're going to be getting some food catered. If you want to bring something, feel free to bring something. But we'll it's going to be $15 donations for a plate, and you'll get a full plate. And after that, we have Mubajwali Day, which is January 4th at 29 St. Denis, which again is going to be, this is going to be our 10th year. And we have 2 lectures on deck, and we're still working on some other things. What else going on? That's it for right now.
Oh, we have
Oh, and time change. 12:30 is time change. Right now, we're going to be bumping that back to 12.
And that's due to the fact that obviously we're having less daylight hours and we want people to get in and out earlier. So if you move that up by December 8th to 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. meetings. So we're giving it another couple weeks to adjust, but I think you'll see the benefit in it as the days are getting shorter and shorter. You'll be traveling.
So that the dinner again, when
Next week Sunday. So we're not gonna have a meeting. It's just gonna be open for 12:30.
$15 plates, and just to let everyone know that ultimately through the Morse Culture Club committees, we're looking to these are our cultural events. We have our solstice walk. We'll be having the winter solstice walk that the Morse Culture Club will be planning. It will be an inside event. But we're looking to sort of have these things aligned much more with, this one is sort of aligned anyways with the American Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
So that's what we're looking to sort of just continue to we're continuing to reawaken our ancient cultural events, which obviously the European has sort of stolen from us. We're reclaiming our stuff and putting our brand.
Islam.
Islam.
Morris. You ready, Mark? Let's do our close up.
I don't know if he's ready still. Downstairs being mischievous. I don't know if he's ready still.
Father of the universe.
Father of the universe. Father of love. Truth.
Peace.
Freedom.
And justice.
Allah and protector. My God.
And my salvation.
By night.
And by day.
To the holy prophet. Mubajwali. Islam. Ashe. Islam. Islam, Morris.
Good to see you, brother.
He's a love boy. Islam. What's up, girl? How you doing? Everything good? Good. What's up, baby? Everything good? Yeah. You good?
So I don't know,